Welcome to the Eating for You podcast. I'm Sally Ann Pisk, accredited practicing dietitian, mindfulness practitioner, and author of Eating for You. If you've been following along and tuning into our seasonal Chinese medicine series with Tania Grasseschi, then you have picked up that there is a refreshing way to look after ourselves, and that's actually to work with our bodies rather than against them. Welcome back, Tania.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on again. It's lovely to be here.
Today we're exploring the question, what is digestion trying to tell us? Because digestion is more than stomach bloating and gut health. It's much more. In Chinese medicine perspective, we look at energy levels, eating habits, emotional well-being, and being able to truly nourish ourselves. And science also backs up that gut health is integral to our overall health and well-being. So if you've ever wondered why healthy eating can be especially difficult during stressful times or during transition, then our conversation today is for you. So I've just mentioned that gut health is much more than stomach problems, maybe constipation, indigestion. So Tania, from a Chinese medicine perspective, what is digestion?
That's a huge question. When I talk to my clients about digestion, I'm talking not just about how they digest their food, but also how they digest life. Digestion is central to our health, which is why, when we've been talking about the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, the earth element, which is the digestive system, is central to everything. We say that the earth feeds the 4 sides. So without our digestive system, we don't have the resources we need, both mentally or emotionally or physically, to do the things we need to do.
Yeah. So digestion is very much more than simply breaking down food. And when I say simply breaking down food, that part of digestion is actually quite complex as well. But when we talk about digesting other things, Tania, so we're talking about our emotions, our mental stress, everything that pops up in life?
Yes, in Chinese medicine terms, we say that the digestive system, which is the earth element, relates to the spleen, pancreas, and the stomach. Because when we talk about organs in Chinese medicine, we're not just talking about the biomedical organ, we're talking about a complete functional system. So, and again, in Chinese medicine terms, we talk about the spleen energy, which is sort of equivalent to the pancreas biomedically. But again, it's that bigger picture of the spleen looks after our thought processes. It rules our ability to think clearly, to reason, to remember. So, I remember when we were studying at school and, we always talked about how students have lousy digestive systems because we're constantly thinking and memorizing and worrying, because worry is the emotion related to the spleen. So yeah, it's a big picture.
Yes, I love one of the Chinese medicine sayings, and it just sort of come to me as you're talking about studying. And it is, the chi or the energy goes to where we're focusing. So if we're sort of focusing all the time up in our heads, there's nothing down here for our digestion. And, spleen energy being something that I have to take care of quite closely with my constitution. I'm very well aware that if I don't eat mindfully and I eat with distraction, then I'm going to have indigestion after the meal. So we'll get on to what our digestive systems tell us as we work through today's conversation. So how does the earth element actually support digestion from that Chinese medicine perspective?
There's a number of different ways of looking at it. One is that the stomach, of course, receives the food that we eat, pushes it all up, rots and ripens, we say in Chinese medicine, and it then sends the essence of that food that we've just eaten to the spleen. The spleen then takes the good energy from that food we've eaten and it sends part of it up to the lungs, which then connects with the air that we breathe and creates qi. And it sends another part up to the heart, which then connects with our spirit, with our shen, to create blood. So we've got the stomach, the spleen, connecting with the lung, connecting with the heart, connecting with the air that we breathe, connecting with our spirit, creating blood and chi that then is transported throughout all the body and nourishes all of the other organs, all of the cells, our muscles. That's how we see digestive systems in Chinese medicine. But we also see the digestive system like a big pot sitting on the stove bubbling away. And we say that the pot is like the stomach. The fire beneath that pot is the spleen's energy, and the pilot light is the kidney energy. And then all of the steam that rises from the pot is what goes to the lungs and the heart. So there's a number of lovely ways of looking at the digestive system in Chinese medicine.
Yeah. So where does the earth element fit in? Because I know in our seasonal discussions so far, we've talked about different seasons being predominantly one of the elements. So where does earth element pop up in the seasons or in the timings of our life, perhaps?
It pops up in two different places. In the standard 5-element processes, it follows the fire energy, which is midsummer. So we often say earth is late summer, the harvest season, which makes sense because we're talking about harvesting all the wonderful foods that we need. And of course, a lot of the foods that correspond or nourish the earth energy are those late summer harvest foods. But we also can see, rather than having the 5 elements in a circle, as I mentioned earlier, we've got the earth energy in the middle, which then has fire and water above and below, metal and wood on either side. So the earth is feeding and it's central. So it feeds everything. So it's the transition between seasons as well as the late summer season. So, it's one of those things where we can't survive without eating.
No?
The quality of our life depends on how we nourish ourselves in other ways as well.
Yes, which I'm looking forward to exploring in our conversation as well. I just want to mention Tania and I have reflected on our seasonal discussions and thought a nice way to summarize everything we've been covering in these conversations would be to do one on the 5 elements system from a Chinese medicine perspective. So that will be coming up, and we're aiming to bring that together for you in a really practical way. So as Tania was just describing, that concept of how the different organs in Chinese medicine support our overall health and well-being. So Tania, many women over 40, and that's a lot of the clients that I work with, tell me that they feel tired, rushed, overwhelmed, and often eat on the run. How might these everyday pressures from a Chinese medicine perspective impact on our digestion?
That's a great question. Both from a Chinese medicine and a Western medicine perspective, we know that when our body is in a state of fight and flight, we cannot rest and digest. Therefore, we actually need to switch off that fight and flight mechanism to switch on the digestive system. Yeah. And from a Chinese medicine perspective, we basically look at, wood attacking earth when we're in a state of stress. But, that's for another time, that discussion. But it basically relates to that idea of when we are feeling overwhelmed, when we're stressed, when we're eating on the run, when we're throwing down our food while we're trying to write up a report, all of that has switched off our digestive system. And because it's switched off, we can't absorb the nutrients in the foods that we're eating properly. And if we're not absorbing those nutrients, we're not rebuilding the resources that we use constantly. And without those resources, we are going to feel exhausted. Yeah. There's all this talk of chi and energy, but it's factual that, if we're not eating properly or we're not digesting properly, we are exhausted. We are tired. We don't have the resources. And because then we're tired, we're not thinking straight. Everything feels a lot harder. Because we're not thinking straight, everything's feeling harder, we start to worry. We start to double think ourselves, second guess ourselves, sorry. So all of these aspects of physical and emotional come into play. So the best thing we can do is to stop multitasking when we're eating, is to actually make time to stop and eat. And as you often say, eat mindfully. Take a few deep belly breaths. It takes 2 minutes to take 10 long, slow, deep belly breaths, which helps to switch off that nervous system and switch back on our digestive system. And then we can actually absorb the foods that we're eating. And then when we're doing it mindfully, we can actually taste what we're eating.
Yeah.
And when we're tasting it, we make better choices as to what we're eating.
That's right. And I often liken us sitting down to a meal as trying to fill up your car with fuel or even electricity. We don't expect the car to keep moving and get topped up with fuel or with electricity, do we? We know that we have to stop the car so we can actually fill up its tank or fill up its battery if you've got an electric car. So even though it makes sense, I know with the clients that I work with that many women find it really difficult just to stop and eat without distraction. And I often say it's kind of mindful eating 101 is the first thing we actually have to do is to sit and eat without distraction. And that means turning off all those external distractions. But then what so many of my clients say, then I start thinking about what I have to do after I've eaten. And so I always say to them, look, if you're not in the habit of keeping a list of things to do or jotting down ideas, then allow yourself to do that. But also don't be afraid just to say to your mind, it's okay, I'll get to that after I've eaten, and just get back to the meal. But we say it like it's so natural and it's so simple, but there are some struggles getting to that point. But it's certainly worth the perseverance for all the reasons that you've mentioned, Tania. So we've already touched on some of these things in terms of those eating habits that weaken our digestion, sort of rushing, being distracted. But are there food choices or timing of the day also, Tania, that you see have an impact on digestion?
Absolutely. We work with a body clock in Chinese medicine. And in that body clock, we say that the energy is strongest in the digestive system in the mornings. So between 7 and 9 a.m. is when all of the energy is heightened in the stomach. So that is the ideal time to have breakfast. And breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now, unfortunately, our lifestyles, getting the kids to school, getting to work, doesn't always allow us to have a substantial breakfast. We still shouldn't skip it. Even a small breakfast is good. Then if we can't make breakfast that main meal, at least make lunch the main meal, because there's still that energy sitting within that stomach around midday, sort of between 11 and 1. So if we can make lunch the main meal of the day, have a decent breakfast, have a nice big lunch, by the opposite end of the day, there's not much energy left in our digestive systems. But unfortunately, we tend to have massive dinners. We then sit down with a full stomach and do nothing but, watch TV or just sit around in the evenings with these full stomachs that we're not able to use that energy. Whereas when we fill our tank, you were talking about car earlier, if we fill our tank first thing in the morning, we can then get through the whole day on that tank of resources rather than trying to get through the whole day on purely adrenaline and caffeine. So it's, dinner time is one of those times when we should just be having an early meal and a really light meal so that we can sleep better.
Yeah.
And if we've nourished ourselves throughout the day, we're not going to be starving hungry for a 3-course meal at night. We're going to have less chance of having reflux and bloating and a bad night's sleep because we've got indigestion all night. So certainly the timing of when we eat is important.
Yeah.
So skipping meals doesn't help. Irregular eating habits, and we've talked about eating while stressed or multitasking. So all of those things are not so good for the body. But also on top of that, highly processed foods are really hard to digest. And cold raw foods can be a challenge if you have a weak digestive system. For a lot of people, it's not a problem. But generally, those people who come to see me or to see you, they're struggling with digesting because their digestive system is weak. Therefore, there might be more vitamins in a raw carrot than in a cooked carrot, but your digestive system just isn't getting at those vitamins. So you're better off cooking that food, being able to access and release those vitamins into the meal. And it's just easier. It's like that cooking pot I talked about earlier. Every time you throw cold, raw stuff into it, the boil goes down and it takes energy to bring that boil back up again.
Yeah.
So especially in winter up here in the mountains, no salads.
No salads at all in winter. I totally get that, Tanya. And I think it's really important, and I think it's really wonderful as well, that science is also showing that timing of the meals as being really valuable. And, there's good studies now saying basically you could eat the same amount of food, but if you ate it in that first half of the day and then had that earlier, smaller evening meal, as you said, that alone can actually start shifting excess body fat. And also for people with diabetes, again, insulin is more effective in the first half of the day rather than at night. And there's some great studies with shift workers showing, that the way we process sweet things in the evening requires, up to 80 times, I think it is, the amount of insulin, to process the sugar. So I think that eating earlier in the day is a really valuable one. And I think we've touched on this already about the regular meals. I think in terms of their importance, we've talked about the body clock, which again, Western science has been promoting as well. But also I think from a mindful eating perspective, those regular meals are really important just to keep our physical hunger in check as well, because that's where things can go astray. You mentioned skipping meals is not great to support our digestive system. It's not great for setting up kind of, how can I say, a little bit, overeating habits, because we get really hungry and then we overeat and then we feel full, and, that cycle can continue if we're not careful. Are there any other aspects of eating regularly or having, those 3 core meals a day that you'd like to share, Tanya?
That, as you mentioned earlier, the stomach, it does like to be filled and then emptied, and then filled and then emptied. So this constant grazing or constantly having to survive on the dregs on the bottom isn't really helpful to the digestive system.
No. And
But
so, sorry, go on. The other thing, Tanya, that's come out of research is this concept of having a minimum of, say, 2 hours between our eating, because from a scientific point of view, we talk about the cleaning mechanisms of the gut. It needs time to actually do a bit of a hygiene on itself. And perhaps in Chinese medicine, there's a similar explanation of why grazing is less desirable for our health compared to having some times of not actually eating.
the only thing I can think of there is just giving the stomach a chance to recuperate. If it's been busy digesting something and it's constantly busy digesting something, it doesn't get a chance to rest. So, having a decent breakfast and then an opportunity to rest and recover, then having, if you need to keep that blood sugar levels high and you need a little snack for, say, morning tea, having a protein snack rather than a sugar snack is going to last you through to lunchtime. So it is just about giving that organ a rest period, yes, so that it can then do its job properly at the next meal.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose that's one of the reasons why we have, we don't eat through the night, and breakfast is breaking a fast, because we have essentially a 12-hour fast every day where, if we finish eating dinner at 7 o'clock and don't snack right through till bedtime, but, and then have breakfast again at 7 a.m., we've got, fasting is supposed to be good for the body, but we've got a 12-hour built-in fast if we're eating according to our body clock anyway.
That's right. Yeah. And Tanya, I find on that topic of fasting that myself and most of my clients quite naturally do a 12 to 14 hour fast anyway. And, it just can happen. So there's no point to enforce fasting periods. If we do follow the body clock, then we're going to get that nice 12 to 14 hour fast overnight. And I think the other thing you were talking about, giving your stomach a rest and not grazing, that popped into my mind is that I've had many women struggle with actually tuning into what does physical hunger feel like compared to being satiated, compared to being full or overfull. And I know when I graduated, we were doing meal plans that had 3 meals a day and possibly 2 or 3 snacks. So people were eating more regularly, but we didn't really need to do that. And if we're always eating, we're never kind of hungry, but we're never kind of satisfied. And that can lead, to overeating and less healthy food choices because we're looking for a source of, quick sugar. So I think there's lots of interesting things about our digestion and, from just the food digestion point of view. And that's where eating without distraction and being mindful around when we eat can show us some of these habits we don't even know that we have.
Yeah, when we're focused on what we're doing, we can tell when we're full.
Yeah.
If we're distracted, we'll often eat a meal and go, my plate's empty. Did I actually eat that? Whereas when we're mindful, when we're present, we can eat and go, okay, how am I feeling? I'm actually feeling pretty much full now rather than overeating and overfilling. So, there's nothing, 3 meals a day is what we're designed to eat. But they don't have to be 3 massive meals. And even when we talk about having a hearty breakfast or a hearty lunch, portion control is important. It's how much are we eating as well as the quality of the food that we're eating, which is important.
Yes, which moves me quite naturally to our next discussion point, Tania. From a Chinese medicine perspective, what foods represent the earth element or, are ideal for transition periods and, as you said, that period in late summer before autumn?
Traditionally speaking, the earth responds to the naturally sweet foods, which is often why we'll reach for sugar and chocolates and lollies, because our body inherently knows sweet nourishes. But it's the sweet flavour of pumpkins and sweet potatoes and carrots and sweet corn and even rice. Whole grains can be quite sweet, many of them. But it's those naturally sweet flavors that nourish us. Whereas the extreme sweets, because they are extreme, they often tend to deplete us. So in Chinese medicine, we certainly talk about seasonal eating. And because the earth energy is that transitional energy, there's no one particular food to eat. It's about, well, if we're in that transition between, say, where are we now? Between winter and spring, what's the weather doing? Where am I living? Am I in the Blue Mountains winter or am I in a Queensland winter? So eating both seasonally and locally helps us make proper choices. And I love that a lot of the good fruit and veggie shops actually have lists of what's in season in that region in that month. And I have that sort of, magnetized to my fridge, pinned to my fridge, so that we know when I'm sort of thinking, oh, what am I going to eat this month, or what am I going to eat this week or today? I can look at that and go, oh, this is what's in season. That, vegetable or fruit will inspire me to make a particular dish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So choosing seasonally and locally is one aspect of it. And then the other aspect is different cooking styles. So in the summertime, we do want to have, really light cooking, short, quick cooking styles. We want to steam our veggies or we want to do a quick stir fry. Whereas in winter, it's that longer, slower cooking styles. So, soups and stews and casseroles and baked dinners and definitely, wonderful bowl of porridge in the morning to keep you warm. So it's different cooking styles and what foods are in season and local.
Yes, yeah. And we'll retouch on the different recommendations when we go through the 5 elements conversation. And that's why I'm so excited that we've decided to do that, Tania, because we can bring some of these key mindful eating, but also Chinese medicine principles together in that one place. And we've talked today that nourishment doesn't just come from food. And that's why the way we approach our life and digest with, everything that pops up in our day as best we can. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that broader nourishment aspect?
I love that question because I often talk about nourishing the 5 senses.
Yeah.
and how important it is, when we are craving often sweets. I say to my clients, well, your body is craving nourishment. How are you nourishing your sense of sight, your sense of hearing, your sense of smell, your sense of touch, not just your sense of taste? So looking at, decluttering the home, looking at eating a rainbow of colors on your plate, looking at burning essential oils or having a lovely vase of roses or lilies or something that smells delightful in the house, listening to music rather than the news when we're eating. So nourishing the five senses is really, really important when we're feeling empty, when we're feeling depleted.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we've got the nourishment of rest.
Yes.
And play and creativity and community and laughter and movement. So all of these aspects of our life, our holistic life, are what nourish us. Spending time with people who uplift us, and dancing, not just going to the gym and doing boot camp, but having a fabulous walk in nature, or a good, dance while you're vacuuming.
That's right. And what come to mind as you were talking about dancing, it's like that idea of, dance like nobody's watching, like just let it all go. It's the
best exercise.
Yeah, it's the most fabulous thing to do, was what I was going to say. So we talk about nourishment, but this can be something that women in particular really struggle with. I find with a lot of my clients, they're really good at taking care of everybody else. So do you have any tips to share to help women transition, I suppose, into getting those moments of nourishment for themselves as well?
Probably the most important thing to remember is what we're always told on an airplane. Put your oxygen mask on yourself first, because how can you help anybody else if you can't breathe?
Yeah.
So we often think of, and the earth element is about nourishment, and earth personalities are, let me take care of everybody. But they do forget to take care of themselves. But you can't look after anybody else if you're exhausted, if you're not thinking straight, if you're stressed to the max. So learning how to say no can sometimes be one of the most nourishing things you can do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Learning to prioritize.
Yeah, I know. And just as you were saying that, quite a few of my clients popped into my mind, and thinking about some of the fun coaching sessions we had around, how to phrase saying no to certain people in their life, and dealing with the reaction. Because when people have been used to relying on you for everything, it's a bit of a shock when all of a sudden you say no. And it's not like no, it's more like, well, not now, maybe later. Or if you've been doing something for someone, actually take the time to show them how to do it themselves. So then, you're not needed to do that for them. So yeah, no, I love that. It's one of my favorite ones as well, Tanya, is, just say no. But it's just not no blanketly. It's either, as I said, maybe later, or at a time that suits you, or actually show the person how to do that task they want you to do for them. And Tanya, I think the other thing I'd like to explore now is, how can our listeners understand what their digestion is telling them? That, if we're not supporting ourselves well with the earth element, what might be showing up for us in our life? I mean, you already touched on one aspect of the mental worry, for example. What else is happening when, our digestion from that Chinese medicine perspective is not as happy as it could be?
Because our digestive system is what's giving us our resources.
Yeah.
If we're not eating properly, or we're not digesting properly, we are going to feel tired. We're going to feel fatigued. We're not going to be able to think straight. One of the things we talk about in Chinese medicine is, when we aren't digesting properly, the product, or the byproduct of that lack of digestion, is dampness. Yeah. And that dampness can manifest itself either as phlegm, so we end up with sinus problems, postnasal drip, every time we get sick we have a lung full of phlegm. Or it can simply manifest as, it feels like someone's turned gravity up. We feel heavy.
Yeah.
We feel foggy thinking.
Yeah.
and we can't think straight. So it's not always just about, oh, I don't have any digestive problems, my bowels are working well,
Yes.
and I, I'm not bloated or experiencing reflux, but I'm always tired, I can't think straight, I'm always, blowing my nose. Those are also aspects of poor digestion,
Yes.
as well as I'm always overthinking everything, or I just don't trust life.
Yeah.
One of the virtues of the earth energy is trust.
Yeah.
Trust that the earth is supporting us, trust that we are being supported, and trust that life is unfolding in the way it's meant to.
Yes.
And the more our digestive system becomes depleted, the more we'll worry, and the more we won't trust that everything is happening in the right way.
Yes. Yeah. And I know you mentioned also in our discussion for the winter season that accumulation or phlegm, as you refer to it in Chinese medicine, could be body tissue as well. It could be, adipose or fat or possibly even cholesterol levels for some people. So I think it's really interesting that, yeah, that heaviness kind of is a good way to describe it when, yeah, you're feeling tired, you're feeling heavy, but that could be happening inside the body as well. So if someone is listening along and wants to support their digestive system naturally, and we're talking about it from a holistic point of view, what's a couple of things that would be good to get started with?
Stop and breathe before you eat.
I like that one too.
Yeah, because you're not going to digest if you're not present. So stopping and breathing is probably, the most important way of switching back the digestive system on, making those seasonal choices of what we're eating and how we're cooking that meal, more cooked foods, and making sure that you're having, breakfast or at least lunch or brunch so that you're not trying to live on fumes and caffeine.
Yes. Yeah, no, love that. Really simple in terms of the message. And as we're saying later, sometimes that can just take a little bit of support to get in place, but they're definitely where I would start as well. So thank you for sharing those. And Tanya, I know you've got the series of seasonal ebooks. Do you have one for the earth element as well?
Absolutely. That is my center. It is food as medicine that got me onto this whole path. It was because of food as medicine that I discovered Chinese medicine, and I'm still doing this 20 odd years later, almost 30 years later.
Yeah.
So I definitely have an earth element, the Art of Nourishment ebook,
Yes.
and an Art of Nourishment workshop coming up in 30th of August. That's coming up in Katoomba. So, and with that ebook, I talk about, different seasonal foods and seasonal cooking styles. I talk about the 5 flavors. I talk about the 5 keys to digesting well, which we pretty much covered today. And also not just what we eat, but how we eat and when we eat and where we eat and who we eat with. Those 5 questions make a big difference to what's happening. So yeah, the ebook covers a lot of that, plus some self-care tips that specific for the earth element.
Yes, no, I love that. And I'll make sure the links to the ebook and the workshop notification are available in the show notes. And just one kind of fun question to end with, Tanya. If our digestion could speak to us, and it does speak to us, but if it could speak to us in a way that we can actually understand, what do you think it's trying to tell most of us at the moment?
I know for myself that I have a tendency to always be knotted up in that center. And that knottedness is just always reminding me to stop and relax and soften. Because the more tension we carry in our body, the less anything can flow.
Yes.
So my gut is telling me to stop and to relax and to soften.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm getting tingles because I think that's the message that we all need to hear regularly. And I get asked about it on some of my social media posts. What do my clients struggle with the most? And it is that concept of doing less actually helps us achieve more for our health, but in our external world as well, in terms of getting things done. So I love that. Yes. So don't make an excuse to pause, make it part of your day, basically, is a really nice way of looking at that. So, Tanya, once again, thanks for sharing your insights on the Eating For You podcast.
Such a pleasure chatting with you, Sally Ann. Thank you.
And if you've been listening along today and you've enjoyed this episode, please share it on your social media pages. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so, because we will be sharing the 5 Elements episode shortly. So I don't want you to miss out on that. Wishing you a mindful day ahead.